You're listening to 91.7 WMSE, listener-supported radio, brought to you live from the campus of the Milwaukee School of Engineering.
This is Tom from WMSE Radio, and coming to Milwaukee on Thursday, May 4th at the Pabst Theater is Todd Rundgren, the iconic songwriter, singer, recording artist, producer, and innovator. He's on the phone with us today. Todd, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
You have a new record out entitled White Night, and it's a collaboration record that you've done with a number of artists: Damn Funk, Donald Fagen, Daryl Hall, Betty LaVette, Joe Satriani, your son Rebop. How did you get to put this record together and begin the collaboration process?
It was about a year ago. Cleopatra Records approached me about making a new record, and I really hadn't thought about what I was going to do. Usually, I get a sort of a yearning to make a record, and I'll start to conceptualize it, but at this point I wasn't thinking about it. And there were a couple things that actually kind of came to mind. One that came to mind was it was shortly after the death of both Prince and David Bowie. And I've been making records throughout the 2000s and kind of resigned myself to the responses that they would get, which would be, my fans would probably be or try to be positive, and but the greater market probably would not notice much that I put out another record. So I figured I should not waste whatever time I have left and get really serious about this next record. Try and do something that's worthy of people's attention, if nothing else. And that's when I got the idea to make it a collaborative record. But another reason for doing that was the fact that I live on the island of Kauai, and it's difficult to impossible for me to just call a session and get the musicians that I'm used to working with over to play with me. So my records have become, to a certain degree, echo chambers, where I'm just singing to myself the whole time. So the collaboration was a way for me to also break the habits that I might have been developing and incorporate new ideas from other artists, essentially shake me up a little bit or challenge me to try and rise to whatever it is that they wanted to contribute.
How did you pick the artists? What was that process?
Well, I knew that I wanted it to be an eclectic record, so it wasn't going to simply be one kind of artist, or it wasn't simply going to be one generation of artists. I wanted to hit a lot of different points along the way. There were people that I knew that I wanted to work with, and I had a good chance at getting. There are people that I had never had any contact with, who I had no idea what chance I might have of getting them. But just made up a list of about 24 artists, about 24 artists of various kinds, and had my assistant just set up contacts between me and them, and I proposed just the possibility of a collaboration, nothing specific. And also invited them, if they had some ideas that they wanted to send me, please do. If they were working on a project and wanted me to collaborate on that, that was fine as well. And then after I had made all those contacts, I set about the process of writing, and often trying to guide the material towards the various artists that I knew I would be working with. And ultimately trying to get them to finish and deliver it in time for my deadline, because artists tend to work in their own bubbles with their own deadlines, and they often have conflicts and things like that. So essentially the album is those people who came back with something, even though there are other potential songs and projects still kind of out there that aren't quite finished but may be finished at some point.
In putting the record together and coming up with all of the tracks and the artists that you were able to get tracks for and collaborate, were there any surprises along the way? Were there do you have a couple favorites possibly on this record, or surprises that you wanted to talk about?
Well, in some senses it was always surprising, but the biggest I guess the biggest, most pleasant surprise was Trent Reznor's response, because just a couple days after I spoke with him, he sent me almost an entire album's worth of ideas for me to choose from.
Wow.
He and his partner, Atticus Ross, spent a lot of time doing soundtrack work now. He's like won Oscars and things for movie soundtracks. So they kind of keep a library of ideas. Anytime they've got an idea, they record it and they put it aside, and later on pull it out when it's appropriate. So they essentially gave me access to that library of ideas, and that was just way more than I expected. The biggest problem was trying to whittle it down to which thing I wanted to do.
And you also recorded with your son Rebop. How was that father and son collaboration?
Well, it was much like all the other ones. It was, at least in the sense of, we collaborated remotely. I do see my son, but he lives in Portland. I was in Kauai when I was doing this project, so he, like everyone else, had to do his thing by himself and then send it to me, and then I would kind of integrate it into the larger project. So he has influences that I don't necessarily have, which is what I wanted. He likes to listen to instrumental music, and especially by like really talented super musicians. He listens to this group of guitarists, I guess, or guitar-based group called Chan, and they do very smart music and very technical playing and stuff like that, and that's what he likes to listen to. And so he tries to emulate that, and it's just too far beyond me to try and do that. And so I get that kind of indirect influence, of what he's listening to and the stuff that he writes. And then he sends it to me, and then I write around it. And that's kind of, one of the ways that the project came about. Other instances, I will write a whole track out and sing the backgrounds and everything and send it to someone, and all I have to do is sing on it. Or, for instance, I will get a whole track, as I did from Joe Satriani, and all I have to do is figure out how to move the bits around into an arrangement that I can write a song over. So there were a lot of different methodologies, but from my standpoint, I didn't want it to come off like a duets album. I wanted it to be a record where whatever contribution somebody made, it was there kind of unadorned and not competed with. That in a duets format, you often wind up singing with someone, singing on top of each other, essentially.
Sure.
And, that works sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, people are fascinated with, the collaboration between Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett, but I don't think she has discovered the proper line there between the two of them. I think she bulldozes him, and I don't like that. So that was, kind of in my mind. If I get anybody to contribute, I want them to shine in that particular context.
What's it like to take? What's it going to be like to take White Knight out on the road?
Well, we're on the road now, so we've already discovered.
But what have been the challenges? I mean, I know none of the artists are certainly touring with you, but how do you take something this dynamic and put it into to you and your band on stage?
Well, obviously there will be less singular focus on this current record than there would have been in the past, because you have cited correctly that I can't get all those artists to just show up on my stage. Ideally, if I can get it to happen once or twice, that would be great, but that's all just the vagaries of the geography and where people find themselves. But this particular show is probably the most elaborate I've taken out maybe since Utopia toured. It's at least as elaborate as the Liars show, if anyone remembers that.
Awesome.
Essentially, the entire stage has been turned into a video screen, but you can see through that video screen because there's another stage-sized video screen behind it, and the band is kind of like the meat in a video sandwich. And then I'm in front of that, and I've also got the Global girls, Grace and Ashley, who've been out with me during the Global tour, to sing backgrounds and to dance and to look beautiful. So you get the best of all possible worlds here.
And who's touring with you this time around?
It's my regular band. It's Prairie and Chasm and Jesse, and the only difference in the band is John Forensic, my keyboard player, is retired from the road, so his spot's been taken over by Greg Hawkes from the Cars and the new Cars.
Outstanding. And in the live show, outside of doing things from White Knight, you're going to be playing, obviously, some of the things from your extensive catalog, some of the songs from your extensive catalog. Will we see and hear some Utopia songs?
I'm trying to think whether there are any. There are songs that Utopia has performed or has been known for performing in there, but there aren't really many Utopia songs. Utopia was designed originally as a way for me to do more guitar playing, because back around Something Anything, I was starting to write more and more on the piano, and the piano became the principal instrument that would appear on my records, and then occasionally I would play a guitar solo. So I got into the Utopia concept because the song part of it became a lot smaller and the instrumental part became a lot bigger, and we became like a jam band. We do like 4-hour shows and stuff. Well, we had like 3 keyboard players and a guitar player, and every one of us wants to play a 10-minute solo on every song. So that's kind of the difference, or between what I do and what Utopia does. Now, the band became more poppy in years after that, but we were still very much, stage production oriented, and prog rock was our thing. It was still supposed to be, instrumentally challenging for us. This kind of thing that I'm doing now, the important thing is which songs I'm doing, more than how technically well we play them. And I'm trying to pick stuff I'm trying to find the most meaningful material, and by that I don't mean necessarily the hits. The hits mean a certain thing, but they may not mean something as important as another song that all of my fans are familiar with, but was never actually a hit record.
Sure. So you're going to go deep into the catalog?
We're going pretty deep. We're going back. Well, I can't say that we've hit every single record. That'd be impossible. It's supposed to be like my 27th record or something like that. And if I played a song from each one of them, it would be a 3-hour show.
Yeah.
So we're doing, we've got like a 22-song set that's just under 2 hours. And we try and cover a lot of ground during that, but keep it coherent. There are distinct phases throughout the show.
Are you switching it up, or are you sticking to the set pretty much?
The way the show is constructed, we can't mix it up too much. There are, as I say, there's distinct segments to the show. There's actually 4 distinct segments in the show, and I do a costume change in between each one. So it's a little bit difficult to improvise when you're getting down to you've got exactly this much time to get out of one outfit and into another outfit.
Sure. If you've just joined us, we're speaking to musician Todd Rundgren, who'll be playing this Thursday here at the Pabst Theater, and on Thursday, May 4th at an 8 p.m. show. And technology and music, you've long been known as a pioneer in it. Are you happy where it is right now with technology?
I think it's great, actually, that the technology has come down to the level where anybody can afford to get in the game. It doesn't mean everyone is going to become successful at it, but there has always probably been a history of people who the public should have known about, but they could never get the resources to get their music on record, or they got connected with a label that didn't really have the power or the experience, to bring that record home for them. Nowadays, you can have a whole studio on your laptop and take as much time as you want perfecting your record. And you have the advantage of YouTube in order to promote your record. And usually if there's anything of interest at all to the public on it, you're going to start accumulating hits. And that's how you essentially advertise yourself for what your true career is, which is playing live. Because that's where you'll make the most money and likely where you'll have the most fun.
And are you excited to see? Are you excited for Renovations? Are you always trying to lead along that line?
Well, I don't always, try and just for the hell of it get on the tip of something.
Sure.
Sometimes things happen, and I'm not crazy about them. I'm not crazy about the way they play out, and I'll wait for the heat to come off it a little bit, and try and bore down a little bit more and see why is this kind of music worthwhile doing. I didn't get into the whole digital kind of thing, and when everyone was going to synthesizers in the 80s, I was going a cappella. I was going the other direction. So it isn't always in sync with what's happening. Sometimes it's ahead, sometimes it's behind. If I recognize something that I think works for me before anybody else does, I'm going to jump on it. But that also means that it may not get as much recognition as when the rest of the crowd comes along and starts to do that. That's where that whole pioneer thing comes from. Sometimes the pioneers are the first ones to die. So.
Yeah. But at the same time, the new album's coming out on vinyl, and it seems like vinyl's made a comeback. Was that a choice that the label made, or you and the label made?
No, that was the label's choice. I don't have the same kind of infatuation with vinyl that a lot of people have gained. I think a lot of it's generational. A lot of kids like vinyl because they didn't grow up with it. We were used to it when I was a kid. That was the only format there was.
Sure.
To them, it seems like new. It's a new diversion. They probably have not come to the realization yet that to actually properly listen to vinyl, you have to install a concrete block in your house somewhere, put the turntable on so that every time you walk across the floor, the record doesn't skip,
Right.
And that sort of thing. And probably most people who are into the so-called vinyl thing probably are ignoring all the fidelity issues, because I think one of the biggest sellers of vinyl is Urban Outfitters, and they sell these really old-fashioned little portable record players, that have two 5-inch speakers in them. So that's what I think a lot of younger people are listening to the music on. So they're not even hearing the bass anymore. They're not hearing the the highs anymore. They're just hearing that mid-range sound that we all grew up with. But,
well, the irony
is CDs essentially that CDs replaced.
Sure, and the irony is that here in radio, at least at this station, that cassettes have made somewhat of a comeback. That same generation has found the shoebox in the basement where, Dad made the audio mixtape for Mom, and then a lot of questions happen and ask what a cassette is, and now suddenly we get promotional promotional material here on cassettes. It's, I don't know. I had to ask.
Well, in the age of ephemera, when the majority of audiences was moving towards just downloading everything that they heard, there are still parts of the world in which, and still, segments of the music buying public who still have, kind of an affection for the material artifact.
Sure. Like
in Japan, the Japanese buy more CDs than the rest of the world combined. They don't download music in Japan. They listen to CDs.
That's fascinating.
Ironically enough. They can, but they don't. They're still stuck in the CD era. And as a matter of fact, the Japanese took the CDs like nobody else did. I remember in the golden age, which was like the late 80s, when they started rediscovering records from the 50s, of which there might have been only a few copies existing in the world, and converting them to CDs and duplicating them, and then suddenly whole genres and lost albums became available to you. And we used to go to Japan and go to a big record, like a 7-story tall record building,
Wow.
and just buy and they're not giving it up.
In your career, you've also played the role of producer to many, many great and iconic records. How did you get your start as, being a producer?
Well, I was in a band called the Nas, and the Nas went through this sort of whirlwind superstar experience, in that we went up really fast and down just as fast. And during the course of that, we only made 2 records, but by the time we got to the second record, I decided that I wanted to produce the record, because our first producer just sat in the booth and read the trade magazines, and made sure that we didn't go over budget. But after the Nas broke up, which was really only about 18 months after I put the band together, I was on the street. I was living with clothiers in the West Village and doing lights in a club. Nothing to do with music at the time. I didn't know what I was going to do next. And somebody who I had worked with previously was now working with Albert Grossman, found me and said, why don't you come and become like an engineer and producer at the Grossman organization? Because we got all these old acts who haven't figured out how to make the transition into modern records. And that essentially gave me my start. And my own records I just made as vanity projects. I had no intention of touring them or anything like that, because I had never been a front man before. And I became so successful at record production that I never did have to worry about the success of my own records. And that's been the hallmark of my career, up until more recently, when the whole record industry thing crashed, and the financiers of my advances when I produced a record for somebody, they were all gone. So that, combined with the fact that the technology was becoming affordable enough that anybody could build their own studio, ergo you didn't need a producer to be the gateway into the studio anymore. So I hardly ever produce records anymore. I do a lot of remixing and stuff like that. People like the sound, but production has changed a lot. The whole production business is a lot different. You look at a record nowadays, and you might see 5 producers on one song.
You see, that's very commonplace, where it's the focus is the song rather than the entire project.
Exactly, and it's no longer like when I used to have to take a band under my wing and walk them through the entire process to try and come up with some coherent final product.
Well, you've done so much. What do you want to do next, Todd?
Well, this tour has just started, so I want to live through it. And after this, we take a little break, and then we take a somewhat abbreviated version of this tour out with Yes on the Yestival tour. That's August and September. Then in October, I go out again with the All Stars for about a month. Haven't figured out what we're doing at the end of the year, but we've got a number of other things that probably are more long view things that I hope to get accomplished. One is I've been talking with a lot of people about doing a Broadway musical, and the only thing we're having problems with is coming up with the score, because we've got plenty of music already, and if we have to write any more, I can easily do that. But that is something that I'd like to get involved in, a more theatrical music, because I tend to conceptualize my live shows anyway in one or another theatrical manner, and to be able to do a whole kind of story, I guess, that of which my music is the impelling force, is something that's always been interesting, and hopefully we'll get it done this time.
That sounds really exciting. Well, I want to thank you for joining us. We look forward to your Pabst Theater show this Thursday, May 4th. I wish you continued success as one of the greats in rock and roll, and especially with the new album, White Knight. Everything I've heard just sounds better than the next song. So thanks again for joining us, Todd.
Terrific. Thank you so much. We'll see you in Milwaukee.
All right. You take care, Todd.
Good. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.